Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to Living the Dream with Curveball, a podcast where I interview guests that will teach, motivate, and inspire. Today I am joined by a special guest. He is a partner in Shane Salk Productions. Shane Salk is an award-winning audio creator, producer, and sound designer. Shane's product has reached over 200 million impressions, spanning over 150 countries across the world. So we're going to be talking to him about everything that he's doing, how he got started in acting, and anything else he would like to talk about. Shane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit of background about yourself?
All right. Yeah. I was born in Seattle, Washington, and my first love and everything was theater, and I went to school for acting. I moved down to Orange County, California for that, which was quite a culture shock. I got to say, I didn't do very well the first couple of years there, just socially, just anxiety and stuff. But after I got out of school, growing up, I listened to a lot of old time radio shows, Dragnet, Suspense, Gunsmoke. I could go on and on. So I always had a love of audio. And when I graduated, I had the opportunity to partner and create a show in 2008. And my love is the idea of taking the medium and taking a medium, and especially with audio, and bringing it into the mainstream, and not sitting back on your laurels and going, well, this is what it is. This is what it can be. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. I want to push those boundaries and go, well, I can make Lord of the Rings just audio. That can happen. It's not a stagnant medium. Then I've been acting. I performed with Disney internationally for a little while. Moved to New York because I was very tired of LA. And then I produced a version of A Christmas Carol that was all audio with my producing partner, Bill Holmes. And that went really well. We had some really great people in it. Huge animation people, Maurice LaMarche, Rob Paulson, who as a kid, I would watch them do Pinky and the Brain, and they're just these iconic voices. So being able to work with them was a little jaw-dropping to me. I wasn't quite sure how to handle it. And so over the course of many, many years, I've always been trying to elevate this audio medium. And then I've been trying to get a company started in projects, and I wanted to do it right. I didn't want to do it just sort of the way I've done other things where it's good, but it's kind of fly by the seat of your pants, make it work with nothing. So after a number of years of trying to get resources and stuff together, I had the opportunity to open up a studio in Los Angeles and create Carcerem, which is our current show. It's a fantasy fiction audio series, full cast of over 120 people, cinematic, immersive sound design, original music, original scripts. It's kind of a mix between Lord of the Rings and Princess Bride, and it is more like a movie than some movies I've seen. And that's really what we want to do, is bring a new kind of entertainment to people in a new form. I mean, it's an old medium. Radio is an old medium, but we have such new technology that people aren't utilizing. And I think that people take for granted how much the audience can imagine and how much the audience will come with you when you lead them somewhere. You don't have to hold them by the hand and tiptoe around everything. The audiences are smart. So that's where I am now. I'm in Los Angeles, and we produced Carcerem, and it's out on podcast platforms, and I run a recording studio, which I never thought I would do in my whole life. I never considered me running a recording studio and knowing how all these buttons work and knowing how to remote in all these people. But when running the studio is the reason that I get to make this art that I want to make, you figure out how to run a recording studio to do the other stuff that you love.
Well, what is your philosophy when you are writing and designing audio? What philosophy or things that you go by when you're doing that?
My biggest philosophy with when it's writing, when it's sound designing, uh, I was fortunate to be able to have a number of writers help with this. We had a writers weekend and some other people help with scripts. And I always say, write the movie, don't write for audio. Because one of the things that I find, and I find this in TV, I find this in comedy. I do a lot of comedy. I was the genie with Disney, so comedy is sort of a thing. I find that people write for the audience not to understand what's going on. So when you're writing for audio, people think, oh, well, how are they going to know what the whole environment looks like? And I say it doesn't matter. Unless it's very specific to your story, they can see whatever they want. I create an atmosphere. I create the soundscape. But if you see a different forest than that I see, that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we're both correct. But I say write for the movie and let the sound designer deal with what all that stuff is. And when sound designing, everything is very blocked out. I could visually tell you exactly where everybody is and what's happening. And when there's fights or big sword fights, we choreograph out those sword fights. Now, do you see exactly what I see in your mind when you hear these things? Absolutely not. And that's okay. But it's not my job to get you to see what I see. It's my job to get you to imagine something that makes sense to you. And pardon me for keep saying the word see, but it's all in my head and in people's heads. It's your imagination, and whatever happens, it's in there. You're not looking at anything, but your mind's eye is very active.
Well, I think it's perfect that you focus on the audio medium because being blind, I depend on a lot of audio. So it's real good that you're producing your stuff out on audio like that.
Thank you. I mean, it really is made for the visually impaired. I have friends. I'm big in the voiceover world. I've done, TV. I was on American Dad. I've done big video games, and I have friends who do audio descriptions for movies. But my whole thing is, if I do my job right, you don't need it. You can imagine it's a movie made to not watch. And the sounds put you into a place and they immerse you in an environment. And I think it's, one person told me it's like reading a book without having to read. Because that's how it activated their mind, which I thought was very interesting. And it's so funny because I'll have people come up to me and say, oh, when they were running up that hill, I just saw this and that. That's what happened, right? And I'm like, yes, that is absolutely what happened. And I had never thought of a hill. I don't know how to sound design a hill versus a flat ground. But if that's what you see, you're correct. You're always correct.
Well, speaking of voiceover, what advice or recommendations would you give a person trying to break into the voiceover world?
Voiceover is an ever-changing world. As anything, take classes. It's very funny because a lot of people come, I teach classes. My partner teaches classes. I think Bill Holmes is one of the best teachers in Los Angeles, if not the country, but definitely Los Angeles because I know a lot of them. And as he says, and as a lot of people say, it's not about how good your voice is. It really comes down to acting. There are people that come in and say, well, people say I have a great voice for voiceover. And I go, great. Can you act? Even for commercials, it's about, having a conversation with somebody, even though you're selling newspapers or flights to Antarctica, the way you get people to buy those is to just have a conversation with them. Nobody likes being told what to do. So how do you have a commercial without telling people that they should go buy something. And those are the tricks, is to, if you don't want to, reading out loud, half an hour a day is very helpful. It gets, we don't read out loud. It gets you used to the sound of your own voice and having things in front of you. That's the other thing. It's work. Once you get it down, it's a lot easier, but it's not, don't get into it for the money. I'll say that. Don't get into it for the money, because it is very hard. There's a lot of people out there. The industry is always changing. Things go union, they go non-union. There's always somebody that's willing to do something for less. So it's a lot of fun. It's the best entertainment community I've ever been in. And I've done theater and film, and just voiceover is just so welcoming. But do it because it's fun, not because you think you're going to make a whole lot of money.
When COVID hit, your business was less than a year old. How did you survive and pivot and manage to make it through the pandemic?
Yeah, that was actually quite a challenge and a scary time. Like I said, I had never run a business before. I moved from New York to open this studio so we could produce this show and run the business to be able to afford to live, pay rent, all of those, pay bills, all those things. And when COVID hit, pretty quickly, companies, clients, all these people did not allow people to come in and record in studios. Even if we were very clean, SAG said nobody can go into studios. And so all of our business stopped. It was scary, but I don't believe very often that there's not a solution or something that you can do. So we were still producing Carcerem, and we started being able to record remotely. And I set up a number of systems where people, if they had a good enough sound microphone and stuff at their own home, we could still record them and engineer from our end, so we could continue the process. Townsend Coleman was the first person we did that with, and he was the original voice of the Tick and all these things, so he really helped test out the systems, which ended up working great. And throughout the pandemic, we constantly, while we were working on Carcerem, and we would have phone calls randomly from people saying, "Hey, how do we do this? Can we do this?" I just would always say, "We can do that," and then figure out a way to do it. We got very discouraged and down at the beginning of the pandemic, and we started doing live game shows because my partner Bill had always wanted to host the old match game. And so I said, well, let's figure out how to do that. So we had some cameras here and started doing research, and there were free programs, and we started producing live game shows. And funny enough, because of those game shows that we did for fun, to keep ourselves entertained, to keep ourselves from going out of our mind, because our bubble was very, very small. It was me, Bill, and his family, basically, because we had people who were elderly or under one. And so we had to be very safe. So, but in this, we started doing these game shows, and I learned about all of this different routing and all these programs and all these ways to solve these problems. And then when we got a phone call from a couple clients going, "Hey, we can start sort of doing some things again. Are you SAG? Are you a SAG studio?" Because we have very strict cleaning protocols, and we got all the filters and again, everything to keep everybody safe. We were able to do remotes and in-house a little bit here and there. It was just, we prepared for months and months and months for the arrival of the opportunity. It was well, this is the situation we're in. How do we make the best of this situation? And fortunately, by the grace of God, we were able to contain ourselves, keep everybody safe, and allow production, ours and other people's, to continue to the best of any ability during the pandemic. So that's how it was, just sheer willpower.
You work with actors like Jane Lynch and Neil Flynn. How were you able to get them to work on some of your products? And what was it like to work with them?
Yeah, I will say both of them are fantastic. Jane Lynch, from Glee and Marvelous Miss Maisel. My partner and Neil Flynn, from Scrubs or The Middle. He was the janitor in Scrubs. And my partner Bill is. We have the exact same birthday, September 22nd, but he is quite a few years older than me. And he has been doing voiceover for a very long time. He comes from Chicago. So a lot of these voiceover people that we have, like I mentioned, Maurice LaMarche, Rob Paulson, some of these, we have like 3 or 4 different Ninja Turtles in this thing, Wonder Woman, Grey Delisle. And so Bill has known these people for years. He's kind of came up in the industry with them, and they really like working with him. They just like him as a person. And we did a Christmas Carol back in the day, and people heard that and were like, well, why didn't you call me? So this time we called anybody and everybody, and they all jumped. We did not pay what these people are worth. We paid, SAG minimums, but all of them did it because they like us, they liked the project, and they had a great time doing it. We create a very fun environment, and people really respond to it. Jane Lynch, actually, Bill had known in Chicago, and sort of like You're Ready at the Right Time. A friend of hers called us and said, my friend Jane needs a recording studio for something. Is there any chance that we could use yours? And we said, absolutely, come on over. And she said, she was so nice, so friendly. And she said, if there's anything I can do for you guys, let me know. And we go, well, actually, Jane Lynch, would you have any interest in doing our show? And she said, absolutely. And we gave her a choice of what part, and she picked the biggest one. And we just brought her in for a day, and she had so much fun, and we had so much fun. You can actually, there's like interviews with her that we have behind the scenes. And it's amazing watching these people work, because you really get to know why they are successful. They come in, they enjoy themselves. They're not always, they're not worried about, am I doing it right? Is what's this? What's that? And Bill and I really because we didn't write men and women into any of the roles. It was whoever we thought would fit that role. And it constantly changed all the time. And so when Jane came in, we had her come in, and she started doing her thing. And we're like, okay, so this is who she is. This is how she sees the character. Let's adjust and play. All we did was play. We had the director, Cameron Crowe, who kind of fell into our laps and became a friend of ours, come in and do a part. And it was so very funny because the part originally was written as like a very strong and like mean guy, and Cameron does not have that voice at all. So while he's in there, we're literally changing the scene. We're changing the character to fit. And I think it's one of the best scenes. It's so funny, but it fits the actor. And that's the fun of it. And that's why these people who have the big names and stuff are so good, is because they just come in to play, and we adjust and we say, well, let's try to take it in this direction. Then they start playing in that direction. And if, again, we just make such a fun environment, I think people really respond to that. And I have the great fortune of having Bill, who has known a lot of these people for a very long time.
Now, when you mentioned SAG, I heard you mention that acronym a couple of times. Tell everybody what that means for those who might not know.
Yeah, SAG is the Screen Actors Guild. It's actually SAG-AFTRA now. It's 2 unions that moved together, and they are the acting union. They dictate like safety protocols and minimums for how much you can pay people for different projects and things like that. So it's just an acting union.
What were some of the mental challenges that you faced when you started up your business?
That is quite a heavy question. It's a very important one too. I have struggled with anxiety and depression throughout many years. And I've fortunately got myself to a place where medication and anything else that, and self-care and knowing myself that I'm at a fairly stable place. But it was definitely when I started this business, I didn't know what I was doing. I trusted myself to figure it out, and that's a big thing. Absolutely nothing went the way I thought it would. And I was teaching voiceover classes to make money. We were engineering jobs to make money, and we still had to pay rent on the studio. Things didn't pick up as quickly as I'd hoped. And then when the pandemic hit, I was really scared. And at the same time of trying to make the studio run, we were having to produce Carcerem, which is the fun part, but there was so much riding on what it felt like was so much was riding on every single day that I woke up and came into the studio, or every single decision I made designing Carcerem, that there were definitely times when I had to talk myself down, just off of calm yourself down, take some time. I'm a very social person. And when the pandemic hit, you can't see people. You can't go and hang out and relax that way. So there were times when it was 12, 15, 17 hours in the studio all at the same time. So I had to remind myself to, pull back, self-care, that kind of thing. And that while it feels that everything, because I moved from New York to LA. I lived in a back house with no kitchen. I felt like I moved here and started this business, and here we are. And I've been working towards it for so long. It felt like it was either make or break, that everything I was doing was make or break. And that was a huge struggle. And still, there are days, when I struggle with that idea of, if this doesn't work, if it doesn't sell, if people don't like it, then I'm just a fraud and a failure, and nothing was worth it. And I'd been working towards this for 10 years and it didn't work. And maybe I was wrong this whole time, that this is a stupid medium and nobody cares, which I had heard for the last 10 years from different people. I mean, you hear so many negative things, but I keep reminding myself, and I was very fortunate to have friends who I could call and go, hey, I'm having one of those days. And then they remind me of all of the things that I had done, all of the work I had put into things, that it wasn't just a fly by night, idea. It's that you've done these 50 things that you don't even think about. But every day you wake up, you did those 50 things so you could wake up and be where you are. I had to remind myself, because I know that especially for entrepreneurs and stuff, you can gain weight, you can become very unhealthy because of the hours, and it's depressing. So I worked very hard starting in January to, eat healthy and focus my energy on something else besides the project and the company. While again, 100% of my interest was in the company and focus was on the company, I realized that if I didn't have, again, something else, even me cooking healthy foods or whatever, learning what the heck healthy foods was. I mean, I would eat a salad, think it was healthy, and not think about how much salad dressing I was putting on, things like that. But even something small like that, focusing, was making the project better because I was in a happier place, because I didn't have to spend 24 hours focusing only on this one thing that I felt was a make or break in my entire life. It was and continues to be a huge challenge. But I will say that even at this point, I'm very, very proud of all of the work that I've put in and my team's put in, and the things that I've accomplished. So if for some reason nothing ever happens, if my business doesn't work, if the studio just stops working, if nobody hears the show, I can still look at it and go, I'm really proud of the work I did and the products I put out there and what I've been able to do. And I don't rely on awards or accolades or anything like that to define my worth and my success. Don't get me wrong. I would like all of the awards and all of the accolade, but it just doesn't, whether you get them or don't, whether I get them or I don't get them, I'm very proud of what I've done.
So let's talk about audience building. When you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, what's the best way? How do you build an audience?
That's a very good question too. It's hard. When the pandemic hit, a lot of people started doing podcasting. A lot of people started doing anything they could do from their home. And so podcast or audio series kind of became a buzzword in some circles where they're like, oh, great, you have one too now? And I've been doing this for a very long time. But I really believe that you build an audience from sort of the ground up. You don't go after large groups of people to get your name or your product out there. You go after a small community. You go after a few of your friends that really, love this kind of medium. You go to Facebook groups and go, hey, I know you 20 people really like fantasy. Check this out. It's kind of a mix between Lord of the Rings and Princess Bride. If they cling on to it, those are the people that are going to get really invested in it. And then they're going to spread it to their friends. It doesn't happen overnight. But slowly but surely, things will grow and grow, and cream rises to the top, as they say. Which, thinking about it, is a weird way because you always want to mix your coffee. But that's a whole other thing. But you find the small communities. You find the microcosms. The D&D community love this show. For fantasy, you find, the fantasy writer groups, the sword fighter groups, any small group of people that would be interested in your show. Reddit, there's so many places to reach out to people. Science fiction is the same way. Don't just post it on your Facebook and hope everybody sees it. Find the small communities, the meetup groups, all the kinds of things where you can make personal relationships with people, because those are the people that are going to really feel your show, your writing, your product, your whatever. And you want active audience members. You don't want passive ones who just sort of don't care. You want people to really feel for it. And then, because they're going to go out and they're going to talk about it. That's how I feel about it. The more people you can get talking and really love what you're doing, the better. And it grows and grows and grows from there.
For somebody trying to do an artistic endeavor, what do you feel is the biggest downfalls or the biggest mistakes they might make?
I think that there are two, and they're similar. It's people don't trust the audience. I mentioned this earlier. It's that when people... nobody likes being talked down to. So don't go, well, I'm going to go walk over to this red door and leave, and then open the door and leave. If you're saying all those things, you're talking down to your audience, and you don't need to. And trust your own design. Trust the style. If your style is that's fine. But do it because you like that style, not for because you think it's necessary. There are no rules with this. It's a brand new day in entertainment, and people are still trying to figure out exactly how to do it. So if you're trying to do an audio endeavor, listen to other ones, get the idea of what your style is, and trust yourself and trust your audience. There's a big thing to me, which is self-awareness. So let's say you're doing something and you design something and you listen to it. Really ask yourself if you like it, if you think it's clear. And if you say yes, are you saying yes because you really want it to be clear? Or are you saying yes because it really is? Self-awareness will help everything. And then if somebody else comes along and says, I don't like that, you don't have to argue with them. You can go, okay, well, I do. Or if somebody says, I don't like that, you check yourself and go, yeah, I could see that being a problem. All right, I'm going to see if I can make myself even happier with it too. But it doesn't happen overnight. And I will say this, and I've said this before other places, and I'll say it again. When I design, I've been designing for a long time, this kind of thing. I have almost breakdowns every time I sit down in front of a blank episode because it feels so overwhelming. You don't know where to start. Years ago, I used to sit down in front of it and then I'd sit there for half an hour and then I'd get up and I'd scream and I'd yell into a pillow because I was like, how am I supposed to do this? This doesn't, and then you go back and you make something amazing, just one sound effect at a time. That's all it is. So don't feel that if you're frustrated that you're wrong or you shouldn't be doing it. It's completely normal to be very frustrated right off the bat. Just take a breath and start with one thing at a time.
When you first started your business, talk about something that you did not expect to happen that happened.
Well, funny enough, I did not expect it to be so hard to get people to come in to use the studio. Again, I'm around voiceover a lot. There are a lot of people that I know. And for some reason, I thought that, we open this and people will just start telling people to come in and we'll be fine. I also didn't expect, people are going to hear this and go, how did you not expect these things? But I didn't expect the tiny expenses all the time. Fortunately, we had a small budget to do these things and stuff, but like we had I needed to run wires through the walls because we didn't have the right ones. I'm like, okay, we'll just get some wires and they're more expensive than you think. And then you realize you have to get, plugs that are the right. And then you have to get this and then your board break, like our entire board broke. So we had to get a new board. And if you know anything about recording studios, the board is pretty much the thing that makes it work. And then when we started getting, and again, I'm teaching, I'm doing anything I can to make money for me because everything we're making from the studio is going back into the studio. I don't know why I didn't expect that to happen. I just, you hear all the stories about, it takes 3 years for a business to be profitable and successful and to stick around. And somehow in your mind, you go, yeah, but that's not mine. We'll be fine. But how much money that you would make that had to go back into the company was a little, because I wasn't able to pay myself a lot. And still now to this day, I don't very much at all. It does kind of wear at my self-worth a little bit sometimes when I'm like, well, I don't know how I'm surviving. I'm savings and everything else, anything I can do, especially during the pandemic, because I couldn't do a lot of the things that I used to make money. I don't know. I didn't expect it to be as financially hard as it was. I expected it to be a lot of work. I expected to be here very, very long hours. I expected to have to learn a lot because I'd never done this before, and to learn how all this mechanical stuff works and all of these things. I expected all of that, but somehow I just did not expect how much to keep the business going, those costs to be. I feel silly saying it because it seems so obvious, but I really had a hard time going, all of this needs to go back into the company and I can't do anything about it. And the company's great. And people are like, oh, the company's, the studio's so busy. And I say, yes, it is. But I don't know how I can feel sustained at the same time. But you get there. You again, you look around and you see how much you've done with how little, and you can be really proud of that.
Talk about the ideal person that you would like to work with, or the ideal person that you would work with that might walk into your studio.
The ideal person to work with would give me a lot of money and then leave. That would be the ideal. As an artist, as somebody who likes working with people in that capacity, producing, the ideal person is somebody who has ideas, that there's no ego. I think one of the biggest things that kills art is ego. I think most of movies and audio shows and improv groups and all these things that sort of work and then stop, I think that people have egos about it. It's like, well, that was my idea. Well, that was my idea. Well, I did these 3 things, but you're getting credit for just as much as I'm getting credit for. And I think if you take all of that away, the ideal person is going, everything we do here is, I'm putting my all into it, you're putting your all into it, and whatever product we get out of it is the best thing that we can do. Somebody who is just all about the product, that's all about the having fun while doing it, that will come in and play regardless of what they're doing. If they're acting, if they're producing, if they're, coming in saying, oh, I really want to work with you on a new game show, or I want to work with you on this or that. It's just somebody who wants to not just go, well, here's the idea, you go do it. But somebody who's, self-motivated in terms of like, oh, this is what I did. What do we think? And that if it's like, well, I don't really like it because of these reasons, there's no ego about it. It's like, yeah, okay, I get you. And then we move on and we find something else that works, and everything is everybody's. I love collaborating. I think it's one of the joys of everything that I do is collaborating with amazing people. And the best people to work with are the ones that want to collaborate, to want to work with you, that want to get the best product and have the most ridiculous time doing it. If you're not having fun, do something else. That's my thought.
We kind of talked about this a little before, but I know a lot of people in the blind community, and in your bio, you talked about how your work is entertainment for the blind community. Kind of expand on that. And if there are going to be any people listening, let them know how this entertainment medium would be good for them to check out if they're blind.
Absolutely. The everything, growing up listening to the old time radio stuff, again, there's no visuals. It's not TV. I saw worlds in my head. I pictured people. I could turn off the lights and I'd still be in Dodge City in Gunsmoke. And I found it to be, I'm dyslexic. I'm very dyslexic. Reading is very hard and I'm very, very slow at it. But I love stories. And so when I started my first show in 2009, I wanted to create the most realistic space we could. And it's not audio description. It is a movie for someone who's not looking at a screen. You hear the battles. You hear the sword fights. You're in the environment. You put on headphones and turn off your lights. For Carcerem, you're in the middle of a monster fight. You're in the middle of a sword battle. You're in the middle of a magical forest. There's no, it's a medium that really can unite people, because it's not, the blind audience, they have audio descriptions for movies. Here is a movie you don't need audio descriptions for. Instead of taking entertainment and modifying it for a blind audience, literally created something for the blind audience and for the seeing audience at the same time. It's not, again, it's not modifying something. It's not taking a book and then having somebody read it to you. It's not taking something and modifying it for another audience. It's taking something and going, this is for you. I have a number of visually impaired fans from past shows. And I had one of them reach out to me and ask what the characters were wearing. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I mean, are they wearing suits? And I think she meant suits of armor because it's fantasy. And I said, well, what do you picture them wearing? She goes, well, I thought they were wearing suits, but is that what they're wearing? And I say, you're absolutely right. She goes, well, isn't there artwork or something? And I said, we have artwork, but all of the artwork is it's everybody in silhouette. We have a very pretty poster of just silhouettes of two people and a horse walking through a forest with a red background as a sunset, but you don't see what they're wearing. You don't see what they look like. Anything that you see in your mind is correct. It's not guesswork. And even if we do have visuals one day, it's not canon. It's the right thing to see is what you imagine. You can imagine somebody totally different than I imagine, and you're absolutely right. And that's one thing that I love about this medium, is because you're a better designer than I am. If you picture these elegant clothing, I could never make elegant clothing out of anything. I'm a terrible seam sewer person, but I'm going to take credit because you saw it on my production. Yeah, I really do want to hear. I would love to hear more from the visually impaired community about their experience. Like I said, I hear some, but I really do have them in mind while designing all of this.
Hopefully some of my friends will chime in after listening to this interview.
I would love to hear them. Please reach out. Seriously, you can find us at Carcerem, the series, on any social media. That's CARCEREM, the series, or just find me on Instagram. I don't care. I really want to hear from people.
Well, let's talk about podcasting.
Okay.
Give out some podcasting tips that somebody with a recording studio. And I know in your bio, you said you could touch on that. So
yeah,
give us some tips.
Oh, there's so many tips. If you're just starting out, don't expect your first episode to be your best episode. That's one of them. And you chime in here too, because you've been doing this podcast for a little while, and I'm sure you have some stuff, but there are so many people that think that they have to get everything perfect before they launch their podcast. And I will say that's not true, depending on what kind of podcast you have. For Carcerem, I felt we needed to get that first episode really perfect because it's a continuous story. That first episode leads to the second, leads to the third, and so on. So everybody's going to start at episode 1. But for talk shows, depending current event shows, your first episode, you're learning just as much as everybody else is. And so many people that I've talked to just say, well, I'm not quite ready. And it's kind of saying, when will you be ready? Also, I have a buddy who does a podcast called Actor CEO. It's about actors. And the first interview he ever did was with me. And we did it in an old apartment of mine. And it never aired. I don't think he ever put it out, because he realized after doing that interview, he's like, he can interview better. He has other things that he wants to cover. So you don't have to put it out right away in that aspect. You record something and you're like, I want my podcast to go in a different direction. You can do that, but don't just sit and just sort of wait for something else to happen to make you do it. It's on you. Also, there's a lot of technology out there. If you want to record a certain way, if you want to, I would say get a nice microphone. I don't know what microphone you're on, but you sound really good to me. But get a nice mic. Don't just use your computer microphone. Invest in yourself a little bit, because it's going to pay off for you. And the biggest piece of advice, and I said it earlier, is if you stop having fun doing it, get out, because if it's not fun, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I have the Sennheiser MK4. When I graduated broadcasting school last year, I was on Gravy for the Brain, which is a voiceover site, and this was the top mic they recommended. So this is what I went and bought to do
Nice.
podcasting and radio DJing. And I will say you're absolutely correct on what you were saying, that even in my podcast, I've evolved and I've learned, even down to the editing. There's different plugins that I didn't have before to kind of do things a little better, make it sound a little better. There's, a little more confidence. I didn't believe I would get this guest, and now I've got them, and I've learned how to do things better. So my podcast should show how I've evolved and the different guests that I've gotten. Because when I first started, I didn't know how I was going to get guests, but now I'm interviewing former NFL players, people like you, people that if you would have told me I was going to be interviewing 10 months ago, I would have laughed at you. So what you're saying is perfect. And I think you should evolve, and, your episodes should show how you evolved, however that whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, a lot of people are scared to say, well, how am I going to get this guest or that guest? Just ask them. They could say no, they could ignore you completely, but there's a chance they'll say yes. I mean, I used to get actors for things just because I would ask. Michael Emerson, who, if anybody watched Lost, he was the leader of the others. He's an amazing actor. And I went to an event which he was at, and I happened to run into him and ask him if he would, and I just said, would you be willing to do this thing for me? I'm doing this short kind of pilot radio thing. And he said, absolutely, call my people. And sure enough, a couple months later, we recorded it. Just ask. There's no harm in it. And you're worth it. Somebody said the other day, and I thought this was so brilliant, whatever you're worth, don't forget to add tax and a tip. And I thought that was really, really fun and clever, because everybody, underestimates themselves. And you're like, yeah, but don't forget to add how amazing you are to even try. You know what? Succeeding is easy. Failing is really hard. So trying is the worst. It's terrifying every single day. But you look around and you see people who you feel that other people are succeeding around you. And you're like, yeah, that's really easy to do. It's when things aren't going well and you still get up and try. That's when you can look and you go, I know I should be proud of myself now. I may not feel it, but knowing it in my head is at least part of the battle.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some current or upcoming projects that you're working on that you would like people to know about.
Absolutely. I mean, Carcerem is the biggest one right now. Again, Carcerem. It's a podcast. You can find it on all those podcasting platforms. Carcerem, the series, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all those things too. And carceremtheseries.com, you can find all of the info with behind the scenes interviews and things like that as well. We also are still doing, we cut back a little bit, but we do live game shows here. You can find that at craptv.online. You can search Crap TV, CRAPTV.online on any social media platforms and Twitch and all these things. And again, we just have a lot of fun doing those things. So you can follow us on Facebook or on Twitch to know when we go live for those things. I mean, fun, again, everything I say, if it's not fun, stop doing it. And I really try to hold myself to that. It's not fun every single second of every single day. Sometimes it's downright miserable, but overall, I'm having a lot of fun doing some really silly things. And as long as I can sustain that, I think I'm doing okay.
Well, speaking of fun, let me throw another question out there.
Yeah.
It might not be necessarily not fun. For example, I'll take me. It's not that doing my radio shows, being on iHeart is not fun. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it could be that, okay, this is fun, but somewhere I have to make some kind of money and see some kind of return. All I'm doing is putting out money, for example, spend $400 on the microphone, spend this much this month for that. And it's like, okay, this is fun. But at some point you kind of get down because you're not getting anything, or you're like, okay, I don't want to do this forever, just talking to myself or
Right.
What would you say to people that feel that way?
I feel that way too. I mean, but we have 32 or so episodes of Carcerem in the first season out. And by the time we got to that 25 mark, 20, I was miserable. I was really, really having a hard time because I was working so hard and it was all I was doing and pushing through. And there is an essence to that. And I agree, at some point you want to see a return on your fun. It's a hard one. I mean, there's two thoughts on it. I'd say if you're still having fun and you're able to maintain yourself doing this, if you're doing your iHeartRadio job and it's sustaining you and allowing, I mean, like I said, I run a sound studio so I can produce these things. Running the studio is not nearly as much fun as producing the things, but I know that my return, meaning the amount of joy I get out of producing these things, is worth the amount of work and torment I go through running the studio. Self-check-in, self-awareness. That's all I can say is, I mean, I want to say keep at it. I want to say keep at it, keep learning, make the connections, learn how you can make, you can get your sponsors so you can one day not do your other job and you can sustain yourself just on your podcast. All of those things are 100,000% possible. And I truly believe that anybody can be successful. I don't think that in the, having money coming in because of your podcast, I think anybody can do that. I don't think everybody will do that, as we always see. But just because you're this person or that person or that person doesn't mean that you can't be successful at what you're doing. So it really is a personal thing, whether you're gaining enough joy out of doing the thing you're doing to, make up for how much work and energy it is. Sort of like voiceover, I think that if you're just in it for the money, it's not going to work out for you. I think if you're in it to make money and you have a great time doing it, I think that's a much better reason to be in doing what you're doing. But there's no magic bullet. There's no magic switch. There are people that succeed very quickly and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And then there are people that work for 10 years and 20 years and then finally get that big break that they needed. And you never know what path you're on until you're at the end of it or you're in the middle of it when it happens, when the bushes break and you're in the field. You don't know. So that's why I keep saying you got to have fun doing it while the road is hard. I was an actor I'm still an actor, and I was in New York, and I knew a number of people who finally their whole dream was to make it to Broadway. All they wanted to do was be a Broadway actor or actress. And they did it. And then that was the first and last Broadway show they did because they quit afterwards because they realized they had reached the pinnacle and they really weren't happy doing it. That was not what they wanted, but they had been working towards it for so long that they felt just so driven to do this thing. And then once it was there, it was not what made them happy. So that's why I think self-reflection is very important for all of us.
Yep. They always say you never know when you're going to succeed. So if you love it, never quit. Why don't you throw out that contact information again, full contact information, and give us some final thoughts to close it out?
Absolutely. It's Carcerem, the series, CARCEREM, theseries.com. Or you can find it on any social media at Carcerem, the series, or on any podcasting if you just search Carcerem. That's CARCEREM. And you can find me, Shane Salk, on Instagram. I have a Facebook page, Twitter, all those things. And I make it easy. It's just ShaneSalk. That's it. Just Shane Salk. And I want to say thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoy this and enjoy your questions because it's not all about, promotion and, yourself and trying to get people to hear this and hear that. I love conversations with people. And I think there's so many times when people are interviewing you and you just kind of feel that they're just throwing things out there. And I think that your questions and your audience is the way that you cultivate your audience is really enjoyable for me. That's all. I've really enjoyed this.
I enjoyed it as well. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, check out Carcerem, the series, and to all my blind in the blind community, be sure to reach out to Shane and let him know how he can improve things, because he wants to hear from you. Shane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Listeners, please be sure to follow, rate, review, and share after listening. And if you are an Android listener, go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast app. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.